to week 2.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And we've got a win to talk about this week. It was rainfall, ponchos, and a slippery ball pretty much came the Texans' way. And a game that was rather handed to us on a plate, but you'll take it in a season like this. Joining me this week to discuss it and a bit more is Texans Unfiltered, Mr. John Wade. How you doing?
Hey, man, I'm doing very, very well. I mean, let's be honest, like that was a completely unexpected win. Sorry about that. So we got to take them when we can get them. And, you know, it's always nice to beat the Titans, no matter what's going on.
Yeah, I think, you know, it never fails to amaze me how much an impact rain makes on a game, especially like that stadium. It's not got a single brick of roof or slate of roof or whatever you want to call it. And just the havoc it plays with the point after, the running back fumbled even early when it wasn't even that wet. Adrian Peterson fumbled it. Obviously, you know, it looked just visually weird, not for the first time this season, the punting so far in enemy territory at their 35-yard line. And it worked out, luckily, for Cully again. But rain just plays havoc with the ball, I think. And you can't underestimate the impact it can make.
Well, yeah, definitely. But I mean, that goes for both sides. We had to use the same wet ball. We played on the same wet field. We played in that same stadium, and we were actually able to take advantage against a team that, I mean, by wins and losses, are supposed to be the best team in the AFC. So we got to take them when we can get them. And I mean, that sort of stuff never happened for us last year. So it's like, you know what? I'm going to be happy. We had a little bit of luck, and maybe. I know the joke on Twitter was it was our Super Bowl, and you know what? Maybe it was, but hey, beating the Titans, having things actually go our way, even though our offense still has a lot of issues, I will definitely take it. Definitely take it.
Yeah, where do you stand, John, on the sort of, it's a bit of a damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? Because you've kind of got a season that's kind of lost, a team that's, you know, shockingly bereft of talent, and not, you know, to the point where next season could be very similar to this, you know, if not just an iteration of it. So, you know, you've got one crowd of people on one side to say, you know, you want to tank and you want to get the highest pick you can. But I thought, I was thinking about this last night because I was trying to explain it to somebody that I was saying, you know, it's actually sometimes within your interest to lose. But then on the flip side of that, when there's no number one clear, you know, paradigm changing quarterback out there, actually, if you're at third or you're at fourth, I'm kind of happy to leave that in the gods based on what I know about this draft class right now.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding from this draft class is currently there's about 5 guys that could potentially be worth a number one pick. At the defensive end out of Oregon is everyone's favorite, right? Guarantee that he's gonna end up being the first overall pick. There's still a lot of time between now and the NFL draft. However, the problem this year is there's not any quarterbacks that just look like so let's be honest, even if there was a quarterback like a Trevor Lawrence or whomever we're thinking of, like the surefire number one, the Texans don't have enough talent around them to support them. So this year's, you know what, if we have a top 5 pick, we're going to get a quality player. We need a quality player at just about every position. I don't even think that, I mean, the amount of players that we have that you would not consider replaceable, like if there was a better option out there, like maybe a handful of guys, maybe. I mean, you've got Grenard, you've got Blacklock, Reed's a free agent. Who knows if he's going to be back? And on the offense, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Brandon Cooks. Maybe. Like who on the offense irreplaceable? Like we've been playing without Tunsil. We went up against a team that was top 5 in sacks, and I think over the past 3 weeks they had led the NFL in sacks. Didn't give up a single sack. So it's not always the talent level at offensive line. Sometimes it's also the how well they mesh with other people. So again, this isn't to bash Tunsil. Like Tunsil's a great player, but you can make prior to Tunsil, so you wanted to have a guy out there. But I think that it's just kind of telling. Our offensive line's been fine, so even Tunsil, he's replaceable at this point.
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I suppose it happened last year with Tunsil, and again, not to go over old ground, but it reoccurs all the time that when he's not in the lineup, there isn't necessarily a big drop off. So the investment at that position, when actually it's you can cover it up with scheme and route concepts and quarterback timing and just general cohesion with five guys. Yeah, I mean, yeah, the mistakes are well documented. Johnson's probably not a big amount to sort of to gain going over that stuff, particularly in a win as well. I want to try and keep it light. But I suppose one thing before we get into the game was the movement of positions. What did you think of? Well, I suppose there's two switches that they're asking guys to make. Jeff Driscoll, who's a guy who's hung around here for some time now, they're going to move him to tight end. Wasn't out there on Sunday, and you think he'd be, right at the back of the line for snaps. And then you've also got Lonnie Johnson, which is a strange one, because when people were talking about him getting traded, I said I thought the only way you could get any value from was if somebody was going to use him as a reclamation project at corner, because either Greg Jackson gets fired at the end of the year because of his positioning at safety and he just didn't know what he was doing, or he just can't mentally process it. I don't know. I suppose safety is probably a bit more of a cognitive position in corner at times. So what did you think of those moves? And I suppose, how does that now put on a lens of the 2019 draft class when you've got Max Sharpen, demoted to basically jumbo packages as the sixth lineman?
Well, let's see. Sharping, he's the easy one. I'll start off with him, or maybe not necessarily the easy one. He was a guy that played left tackle in college. He didn't give up a sack, I think, since he was like a sophomore in high school. Like, phenomenal tackle. Usually, people kind of consider playing guard easier than tackle, but it is more physically demanding. So what that says to me about Sharpen is Sharpen maybe got by, especially if you look at his size, maybe just got by on his football skill, his ability to play tackle. And maybe guard just won't work for him. He just can't get that NFL level strength for the guard position. So he may end up being he may end up being switched back to tackle. Like, it would not surprise me. Like, it's not clicking. I mean, he had a pretty good rookie season, and just since then, though, it's just been straight downhill. Like, maybe COVID has affected him more so than anybody else because he just couldn't train the way he needed to. But usually at guard, you want your guys that are essentially just maulers, that are going to push guys off the ball, that are going to open up those running lanes, and he can't do that. He's passable in pass protection, but he just can't do anything in the running game. And he's not the only one. Like, that's essentially the biggest problem with our entire offensive line is they don't have the ability to push people around in the running game. So with him, I mean, he's another guy probably going to get bounced around, probably going to be a reclamation project. Lonnie Johnson, it's interesting because he's got a little bit of Kareem Jackson to his game. So I was actually one of those people that thought he could fail into safety. The problem with playing safety, though, versus playing corner is you've really got to be aware of what the entire offense does versus essentially your guy. And it looks like Lonnie just, for whatever reason, it's just not clicking there. Either he's playing hesitant or just not grasping what he needs to grasp, because he tried so hard to be a corner. Like, he really, really tried. But he had the physicality to play safety. He has the size to play safety. And he's good at playing the ball in front of him. That's why those interceptions that everybody keeps saying are luck continue to happen to him, because he's good at playing it in front of him. When he struggled at corner, he struggled with flipping his hips and keeping up with the guy, even though he would usually be just as fast as him, but it was just technique issues essentially at corner. He always played better when he could face the guy. Again, this is why you thought he would be okay failing into safety if that wouldn't click at corner. But it looks like just like his football knowledge is better when he only has to focus on one guy. That's my guess. That's my my assumption on why they're moving him back to corner. And you know what? I mean, he seems like a good guy. He seems passionate. Like, I want him to do well. Like, I really do. I do feel bad that the coaching staff has bounced him around, but the coaches know more than we do. They're with them every single day. I know that there's a lot of attitudes out there that, oh, we have these coaches can't see things that fans see. And sometimes they can't because probably they're too close to it. But with Lonnie Johnson, to move him and then move him again, they have to be seeing something from a coach's angle to think that this is going to work out instead of getting him to try and learn the game to play safety a little bit better. And I think it was Jordan, Texans Thoughts, that pointed out that if Lonnie Johnson is actually the perfect size to play corner in the Tampa 2, he's the perfect size for a corner that he's the perfect size. He's the perfect size for Lovie Smith and what he likes to do with the corners. So maybe it'll all work out. And the Jeff Driscoll thing, I don't really care. Like, that's the thing that I was trying to make a point, and I kind of got into it a little bit with Rivers McCown, and Rivers knows way more about football than me. But he kind of pointed out something that I'd overlooked. It's like, then why is this guy taking up a spot that we can try and potentially poach from another team? Well, he's got the size and physicality to play tight end. If you go back to the preseason, I joked around after, I think, the second preseason game where our entire offense in the fourth quarter, or maybe it was the first preseason game, I don't know, that was so long ago, where Driscoll would be a great tight end or we could run a single wing offense with him in there because he can't throw the ball. But as a runner, he can move the ball. Like, he seemed to be a very natural runner. So maybe the Texans, again, they see something with him. They know him. He can still be an emergency quarterback. They floated this idea of doing like the Taysom Hill packages with him. So maybe, I mean, it's worth a try. Like, if they're not going to go out and look at any of these guys on practice squads. And to be honest, like, as much as I'd like that to happen, you go out there and you look for somebody you can steal off practice squads. It usually doesn't work out. Now, it's worked out with Morrissey so far as a center. Like, he's looked really good. But that doesn't necessarily happen. But at the same time, like, if it was me and I was in a Caserio's position, I would be trying to poach a running back because our running backs, like Donta Foreman was a street free agent up until 2 weeks ago. They signed him, brought him back, and granted, he's come back from an Achilles. He would have been the best running back on our roster. And I mean, he wasn't all that impressive, but compared to ours, he would have been easily the best.
Yeah, but they signed picked up Royce Freeman last week as well. And again, a guy who's got some history of production in the league, but for whatever reason, there just seems to be a mismanagement in that position. But, I think when you saw Dontrell Hilliard, who was on our, squad that didn't make it, when then you've got, who was a victim of the O'Brien culture wars. And I think, that culture thing, I know people keep going back to, but I genuinely think that's why they're trying every angle with Jeff Driscoll, because he fits that mold of what they want. Or what they think they want, anyway. It seems a funny one. Yeah, the Jeff Driscoll one, I think, for me, I think when you think this is the pinnacle of a sport, when it is incredibly difficult, there is so many men, women, and children up and down the country that try and give their all to make this and even be lightly involved at this sport, and you're giving a guy an opportunity to be a tight end after he's failed at quarterback at this stage of his career over other people, kind of doesn't sit all that great with me. And I think it probably goes back to that point as well, John. I think that although this is meant to be a new era and a new regime, there's so much stuff that eerily feels similar. And I was listening to one of the in-house Texas media podcasts, and they're talking to Danny Amendola. I was listening. I actually missed most of the game yesterday. I was flying back from vacation, and I caught the sort of tail end of the game, watched it back this morning. But there was an interview with Danny Amendola, and he talks about, on his onboarding process, essentially, and talks about Dylan Thompson, and he actually refers to Dylan Thompson as part of the player personnel team. And I don't know if that's just poor phrasing, but there just seems to be a lot of stuff bubbling in the background that feels very similar to all the kind of thoughts and reflections at times that were deeply rooted in the cultural flaw, or not cultural flaws, but the structural flaws we have in how we operate as a football team has put us in that position. But yeah, I just thought it was interesting that just popped up again just before the game. But look, winning cures all, so we can maybe move on. But I think it feels like that's just dangling in the background in it, and I don't know when it will go away.
I mean, like, I get what you're saying, but I mean, what can we do? We can root for them to fail. Like, and we don't want them to fail. Like, our days are so much better when the Texans win. Like, we may not necessarily agree with the directions that they're going and how they're prioritizing things, but I think that it's like anything else. Like, if they actually have a plan and follow through with that plan and don't deviate from it, then it'll probably work out. I mean, that's usually how things work. And there's a lot of players out there that are very much like Dylan Thompson. I mean, these kids, most of the time coming out of college, they're coming from the deep South. Like, the South produces more football players than any place else per capita. And then it's California. And then I think New York is up there.
Yeah, Ohio,
but
maybe.
For the vast majority, like, they're coming from southern states where the kind of culture that Dylan Thompson is preaching, that Jack Easter reflecting, I mean, it's not that uncommon. Like, I mean, I played sports down here. I played football. I played soccer. I played baseball. And I played those all through high school, and I'm so not surprised by any of those attitudes. Like, it's not that unusual. Like, if you go look at Dabo Swinney and Clemson, it's the exact same thing. So ultimately, like, that stuff, I get why people are upset about it, but to me, it's a non-factor, because ultimately what comes down to is, can they find guys that play football and want to play together? And if that happens, then it should be fine, and everything about Easterby and Dylan Thompson and all that will be forgotten.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the ultimate challenge of the front office and Nick Caserio. Did you see his interaction with John Robinson? Is it John Robinson? Yeah, the Titans GM. And at the start of the game, it was on the broadcast, and just there's something about Caserio I've never quite worked out. I don't know if it's just his introverted character trying to act extrovert, or just the way he sort of kind of literally bowled over, crippled himself laughing. I just thought it just looked visually odd, the exchange from Nick. I don't know what he's. I still can't quite work him out as a guy, because you see his interviews and just says a lot of words and not a lot of, he's great at giving the sort of politician answer, isn't he? Which is part of the job. I get that. He doesn't really say says a lot of words for 3 or 4 minutes. Doesn't necessarily give you a great idea.
But I mean, granted, he sits there and he gets up there and he filibusters, but at least he's talking.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think it's interesting that him and Vrabel as a head coach is very much in the trenches during practices. And then Nick Caserio also is very much in the trenches during practices, especially for a GM. Like, to actually be out there throwing the ball with the guys. Like, that's just not done in the NFL. But it's interesting, because it's all that I guess it comes over from the Patriots. I don't know. I mean, I don't really see Parcells out there doing it, or not Parcells, but Belichick or Parcell, even, because it's all the same tree. So it's just, I don't know. It's interesting. And John Robinson, what did he come from the Patriots? I can't remember. I want to say he did. So yeah, it's just another guy that they have relationships with, and they're all. It's annoying at this point. They're all part of that same tree. They're all part of that same family, that same culture. Like, half the GMs in the league come from the Patriots. So it's another one of those things that just is what it is. I mean, I'm kind of tired of it, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
But hopefully somebody somewhere will have actually figured out how to scout players like Belichick did.
Yeah, and I think the Tennessee have done a great job. And I think, I mean, you consider how many injuries they've had, they're sitting top of the AFC, how long that'll last, because I think, you saw more players go off. And that was a big factor in the game yesterday. A.J. Brown went off. There's so many guys that they've just found. I think I think you said the broadcast at the start, they're 2 guys away from hitting the record using 82 players. They've continued to find players to replace guys. And I think that plus the weather was the biggest factor. They've just had so much turnover on the roster, so many injuries. There's only so many guys out there that you can find that are, elite level that can, prosper at this level, and you can't keep replacing players upon players, at this stage of the season. So I think the big factor was in with Ryan Tannehill as well. I think he just imploded. I think that was the biggest thing, wasn't it? 5 turnovers, and I suppose all the rhetoric that Mr. Cully keeps going on about, I suppose. It is true, or largely true. It is a fact. I think they've overplayed that, and I think that's probably the bit that's griped on people. But obviously, when you have 5 turnovers and you don't turn the ball over yourself, you better make sure you win that ball game.
Well, I mean, we had 5 turnovers against Miami, and we saw how that went. So, yeah.
Well, yeah. Yeah, that's true.
I mean, nothing is beyond imagination, especially with this Texans team. Like, I was so depressed after the Miami game. However, because it's one thing to lose. Like, I get it, and ultimately it's better for the Texans if they do lose. But to lose with no hope, like you don't even see anything potentially getting better, that's what it felt like leaving the Miami game. This game, I mean, naturally we won, so you're happy about winning. I think that Nico Collins flashed. He should have had a touchdown. Like I'm actually livid. Like that, he had a knee and an elbow down. Like seriously.
Yeah.
Like, whatever. Yeah. I guess they're trying to say that his knee down was actually touching the line, but I don't know.
Yeah, I froze it, and just on the laptop there, just at that moment, and his knee does just brush the paint. But and actually you see a bit of the turf move, and I thought at the time myself, if that was on a field turf, artificial, I think it would have been given.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I don't know. I'm one of the first people that'll say it's like, hey, we got away with something, but that one, I think he had a touchdown, and I mean. Nico, I mean, he's showing something, and I don't think that he gets a throw like that from Davis Mills. So it's kind of this, like the Jets are doing the same thing. Do you try and develop your quarterback, or do you try and develop your players around them? This even goes back to what we were kind of saying a little bit earlier, where I'm cool not having the first pick overall, because I don't think we're in a position where we're ready for a quarterback.
Yeah.
Because a rookie quarterback can't develop the talent around him. So completely get it. And last week against the Dolphins, or 2 weeks ago against the Dolphins, when Tyrod went out there, and I'm like, well, he can't play either, so he's not going to develop anybody. But if he comes out there, and obviously he was still hurt against the Dolphins, but if he comes out there and he plays like Tennessee and he's giving guys a fighting chance for the ball, then he can actually help develop Brevin Jordan. He can help develop Nico Collins. Yeah. Like Brevin Jordan, I think next year there's 3 passes that were thrown to him that next year he catches. But this year he just, he's still a little bit of a college player waiting for the ball to go to him, and he didn't attack it as well as he needed to. But again, that goes to actually having Tyrod Taylor throwing him the ball, where I'm not sure that Davis Mills gives him that same throw.
Yeah, no, I think that those 2 guys are definitely a benefit in the offense, and I phrased it exactly that, John. I think that there's a better chance that those 2 guys will be NFL starters than perhaps Davis Mills will be, or at least one of them will be, just by numbers game. So I think having Tyrod out there throwing it to those 2 guys was good. Only 2 catches between them, but it was good to see Tyrod trusting Brevin on third down. I think that's important. That obviously that you can see that chemistry building there. The coaching staff are obviously building third down packages for him. He probably should have had that one that Elijah Molden punched out his hands on the sideline that sort of stalled the drive when they needed to. But I think that overall, John, the offense, if it wasn't for Tyrod's legs as well, I think it would have been a measly day, because again couldn't run it. And conservative play calling from Tim Kelly. That's another discussion I think altogether, if he'll be here next year. But running it on third and medium, second and medium, it just is not good to watch. But yeah, Tyrod kept them in that game, and if it wasn't for his legs, scrambles for 2 scores, then it might have been a 5 turnover game where you might not have won if it hadn't been for the elusiveness of Tyrod. When the play breaks down.
Well, I mean, here's the truth. It's like, whether or not, because it's kind of a discussion that I had with somebody offline, is it David Johnson or is it Tim Kelly that's the reason why we can't run the ball? Because David Johnson, they don't seem to get. He may be a big guy, but he can't run the ball like a big guy. He's a receiver. He's a scat back in a bigger guy's body. And our running game looked better with I was about to call him with Burkhead. It looked so much better. He was our best running back yesterday, and he's not that great at this point in his career. Like a couple of years ago, he was a fairly decent running back. He was a guy that always looked like he needed to have more touches, but he's not there. But he's a smart runner. He knows when to pivot. He knows when to find holes. And it just makes me wonder, like, I know our offensive line has not done a good job running blocking, but as much as I'm over Tim Kelly, like if Tim Kelly's back next year, I don't even know. Like I can't make any threats, but I'm still going to watch him.
Yeah,
but
he won't be.
I will be beyond surprised if he's back next year. But I do think some of it is not necessarily just his run schemes, but whomever's decision it is to stick with David Johnson as much as they have. Like David Johnson, again, should not be used like a true running back. He should be used like a third down back. He should not be running it up the middle ever. And he should be being used as a pass catching back. But, they're stubborn. I guess they're still trying to win that trade, even though the guy that made the trade's not here anymore.
Do you think it's something to do with the way they evaluate, though? Because, like, I agree. I've not watched the 22 for this week because it'll be out later tomorrow morning. But the Jimmy Morrissey pickup, I think, I liked what I saw last week, and obviously there was some mistakes, especially that one at the goal line in Miami. And then Gary and Christian's come in as well, but they're, for me, I don't know if you've noticed this, John, but they're both exactly the same as kind of what we've got in terms of guys that are actually serviceable pass blockers with some upside, but can't run block worth a damn. And I don't know if that's just the way we're scouting and that. Do you know? And it just seems like it's all repeating itself consistently.
Well, we had talked about it last year with Deshaun Watson, because I had pointed out that every guy that we brought in on the offensive line had a plus run blocking or a plus pass blocking grade, but a negative run blocking. And I think the idea behind that last year, I don't really know if it's still the same this year, but last year, the idea behind it was, well, when you have a quarterback that's an extra runner, they get sacked a lot, you're looking for guys that maybe will protect him better as a passer. And then you rely on him being that extra runner to just naturally make holes in the running game, because the defense has to account for him as a runner. So they're essentially playing a man down. That's usually the cheat code. Like if you look at teams traditionally, other than us, that have a threat as a running quarterback, their running game efficiency goes way up, regardless of who they have playing offensive line, regardless of who the guy is running behind them. Like an easy, just clear example, because everybody is familiar with this, was Alfred Morris was a below replacement running back, but playing with RG3, he was able to put up just Pro Bowl numbers because of the way they stretched him. And then as soon as Cousins came in, Alfred Morris fell off the face of the planet. He then went to Dallas and still was nothing. It was just having that running quarterback open everything up. That's what Baltimore does so well with Lamar Jackson. It doesn't matter who they throw back there. They're like Devonta Freeman is having a decent season. Like, how old is Devonta Freeman at this point? It's just you have a running quarterback. It makes it easier to run the ball. The Texans can't do that. And I don't know if they've just erred too far on the side of like, hey, just get guys that are good at pass blocking and the running quarterback threat will make up for it in the running game, or if it's something else, like that our running backs just can't take advantage of just like the natural gaps there they'll open up. Like we don't have guys that have vision, have good enough running vision to just pick it up, make the cutback, which now that I'm saying this out loud, so this is kind of just me rambling on a thought, like that may be the reason Burkhead looked so good yesterday. He was just able to take advantage of holes that kind of popped up that weren't blocked. And that's kind of what we needed to be looking for with a running back, where David Johnson was never that guy. When he had his most success in Arizona, he was running in a power scheme where he was essentially following a blocker. He's not a natural running back. He's a wide receiver. Yeah. So if he could follow a blocker, he looked pretty good. And follow a blocker to the edge, he looked pretty good. since the guy that lasted 1 year as a head coach in Arizona, what was it, McCoy? He tried to turn David Johnson into something else, and then we bring him here, and we continue to try and use David Johnson that same way, where he's not that guy. Where Ingram, he looked like he had some juice, and it may be similar to Burkhead. He could just see things a little bit better. Whereas, why am I blanking on his name as well? The guy we brought in from Denver.
Oh, Philip Lindsay. Yeah, he was marginalized yesterday.
Philip Lindsay.
Yeah.
He wasn't really used at all, but what he did really well in Denver as well was follow the blockers. So we don't have the offensive line where these guys can just follow blockers. It has to be guys with vision. And I don't know. I mean, that's just what it's looking like to me.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. What bugs me is, and again, a bit of ground here, but like it's still relevant yesterday because you needed to move the ball. If you just had to piece some drives together, it would have been more comfortable than the scoreboard perhaps suggested. But I think that the fact is they just flip flop. You know, they run power, they run split zone. They're pulling guys who aren't very good at pulling because they aren't able to translate their weight and mass into power at the point of attack. And it seems like a basic coaching fundamental point, but it continues, and James Cam does not necessarily improve this line as everybody would have thought. And so they don't stick with some small key principles. I think when you look at Tennessee, despite all the turnover, they still run the same scheme, teach the guys how to play that scheme, and continue to run the ball and move the ball, with a level of proficiency, considering some guys weren't even weren't even dreaming of playing in Nashville, prior to some injuries. So yeah, it's kind of frustrating for that point. It seems basic, but yeah, we just, for whatever reason, that seems to elude us. And again, it's another theme carried over previous to current regime. But yeah, it's certainly in those conditions, you have to be able to run the ball if you want to be a good team at certain times of the season, particularly as people get banged up. You have to be able to run the ball.
I mean, from a personnel standpoint, the Texans want to run power. There's a belief that if you're able to run power, like that's the most unstoppable play in all of football. If you have an offensive line that can overpower a defensive line and you can consistently get 3 to 4, it's like that's what makes an offense just really hum. Like that's something that they always shot to do in New England. It's just making sure that when you need to, you could always run power. So they went out there and they got these huge guys. Like our offensive line mass-wise, when everybody's healthy, is like comparing an SEC offensive line to an ACC. Like it's just these guys are just huge, but they're big guys. So you naturally think they would be able to run power, and they can't. They just physically can't. For whatever reason, they can't. They should be able to, but they can't. But they're too big to run zone. So our running back and our running game seem to have more success with outside zone, but our offensive line isn't athletic enough to actually pull it off consistently.
Yeah, you see that. They just don't go up and see the edge, and it just doesn't happen. And yeah, I mean, I think the offense was, it is an impediment to this team, and regardless of who's out there with it, based on the personnel we've got. But yeah, you'd like to see Royce Freeman playing. Like, you're talking about David Johnson being great behind a blocker. You've got Kwesenbu's brother on the practice squad. Why not throw him in for the last couple of games, see what he's got? You've kept him on this, until this point in this season. So, go and see if he makes an impact. It might just be 2 or 3 plays he breaks a hole for you in a game, but it's 2 or 3 more holes than you're getting now, and it takes a bit of pressure off your defense. Before we come on the defense, you touched on it earlier in terms of the call that was given against Nico Collins for being out the back of the end zone. There was also the spot on 4th down, which then they oddly went for it, but Cully throws 2 challenge flags, loses both. I suppose he probably just added to his resume of questionable in-game calls. The first one, fair enough, go for it. I think somebody's probably in his ear, but second one is 4th and 1. If you're going to go for it, what's the point of challenging it? I didn't get that. I
mean, I think he had a case on both. Like, Cully has done some things. He's done some things that are absolutely head scratching. These were the first 2 challenges, which actually, when you sit there and you think about it, it's like, yeah, they are. But these are the first 2 challenges that he's actually thrown. So now he's 0 for 2 for his career on throwing that red flag. The Nico Collins one, I think that Collins had the touchdown. Like, I mean, he's right there on the line. Like, I kind of get it. Like, no, I do get it why it wasn't overturned, but that one's completely fair. You have to challenge that one. Now, when challenging the spot, this is one that one's a kind of tougher, and because you just don't ever win it. Like that one, there's never anything that's definitive to move the ball an inch or two.
Yeah.
So, I mean, coaches challenge the spot. Like, I think we see it a couple of times a year. Like, it doesn't happen that often, and they always lose. And I think that's why we only see it a couple of times a year. But it was literally 4th and an inch. So it's like, just go for it. Save your challenge, save your timeout. Our offense wasn't really doing anything. The reason we were up so big was because of our defense. Like, I thought for sure the Titans were going to come back, but our defense kept making plays and Tannehill kept doing boneheaded things. But so my thought was, like, I thought we were going to turn into a close game and that timeout would be more valuable because it's an inch. It was an inch. So no, I definitely get it. He had a case. If you look at the video, like, I think that it was a bad spot.
Yeah.
But just because you're right doesn't necessarily mean it's a smart move to make.
Do you remember the spot they did I mean, that was a bad one. Do you remember the spot in Mexico City? And I mean, there was some terrible.
Oh, man.
And the guy almost moved it back about 2 yards. And I don't think they challenged it that night because I think it didn't matter what you did. I think there was grander forces wanted the Raiders win that night, but with the laser pen and everything, and the Hopkins one where he ran down the sidelines and they claimed he was out of bounds and stuff. That's the most egregious refereeing performance I've ever seen. I know that's been in vogue this season, and that, I mean, there was a couple of calls. There was that one, and then what did you think of the one right at the end of the half? Was that intentional grounding because he wasn't out of the pocket? So they've got to call it there, and then the clock ran off.
Oh yeah, that was intentional grounding. Yeah. That was pretty straightforward in my opinion.
Yeah. What was the surprise, and what was the and I suppose it goes back to Mike Vrabel. You can, when you watch him, you kind of think, would you want him a head coach? He's not likable if he's not your head coach, but you see him at the refs constantly, always giving it. He's this sort of archetypal, quarterback, or he's the archetypal jock, isn't he? I suppose in many ways he's probably not everybody's kind of perfect candidate, but I suppose he's done a good job there. But you saw him jawing at the refs, constantly. You saw him right at the end of the game when I think they took a delay of game, and he was getting. You could see him dropping F-bombs like they were going out of fashion towards the end of the game. So I suppose when you see Vrabel, you think, he was in your building. Could you? I mean, it was probably too early to pivot to him at that point, considering all the other stuff that was going on. But he's done a good job there, I think. But he certainly wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
He absolutely has. Like, I didn't think he was going to do as well as he has, to tell you the truth, because he was such a disaster as a coordinator.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Granted, yeah, the year he was coordinator, he really didn't have the excuse that the team was out of talent. There was still a fair amount of talent on that team, and he just absolutely was horrible as a coordinator. And I remember we were all extremely happy about him getting hired by Tennessee because he was failing upwards. But prior to him being a coordinator here, there was talk. I mean, granted, this is from a podcast that doesn't exist anymore, but that guy had talked about how Vrabel, they kind of viewed him as the next guy up after Bill O'Brien. And I think it was a couple of things, like the Texans were looking better. Deshaun was developing, that kind of just made it impossible to say Vrabel let go of Bill O'Brien to promote Vrabel up at the time. And do I think he would have had the same success here that he had in Tennessee? I'm like, well, in Tennessee, he had Arthur Smith and Derrick Henry. Like, there was a couple of things that just went well for him there. Like, obviously you can't say that he's a bad head coach because they've done well since he's been there. But at the same time, he kind of lucked into a situation that was pretty good. And I don't know that having him here would have changed our situation that much.
Yeah. Do you know, I'd have thought just watching him because he's obviously a kind of big figure. You know, Caserio talked about that during the week about how the team's built in his image, and that's definitely true. But I always wonder if he was here, would he have let kind of some of this stuff happen? Is he? I know he's obviously hot-headed. You saw that, but would he have let? Does he see the bigger picture of it? And sometimes when you hear him speak, I think he maybe does. But yeah, we could all do F buts and maybe it's John for 17 hours.
Probably. I know. I mean, Vrabel's an extremely powerful personality.
Yeah.
It would have been interesting because I think Caserio really wants to be the guy that's in charge. Like, he hired Cully and he didn't let Cully assemble a staff. He assembled that staff. Like, this is going to be Caserio's team. It doesn't matter who the head coach is, which I don't think that would have flown with Vrabel. Like, the Titans are Vrabel's team. Like, John Robinson is the GM, but it's Vrabel's team. Like, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Like, you know, he's got his coordinators. He promotes up the guys he wants. Whereas here, Cully's a figurehead. Like, Cully's not in charge of that team. Caserio is. Cully's the coach out there on the field, and I'm sure, and he has all the head coach responsibilities and so forth. But again, ultimately, I think everybody in Houston, if they asked who the boss was, they wouldn't go to Cully. They would say it was Caserio. Where in Tennessee, I think it would be the opposite.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a touch overbearing, but I suppose we've seen what the inverse model can do to your club. So yeah, I suppose it's until we get a true evaluation, we'll see. Just on the defensive side of the ball, to wrap up some of the game, John. But I thought Jonathan Greenard out. You know, would we have trouble up front? But actually, I think Malik Collins continues to flash. Roy Lopez was in the TFL. Ross Blacklock probably had his best game as a Texan. You know, there's a couple of big plays there. He obviously got the sack, then he was down, but he got a TFL earlier than that. He's going up against Adrian Peterson, you know, and I know he got a couple of stupid penalties too. But it was his pressure that right up the gut against Saffold that made him throw the intentional grounder right the second half. So he goes right in Tannehill's face at that point. So it was good to see because he's not done a huge event. There isn't too many clips you could put together as a resume to this point. But I thought the defensive front as a whole, and those three guys in particular, gave you a lot. And I thought DeMarcus Walker as well, who's, you know, so guy, but he pushed the pocket on the field fourth down conversion in the second half. And then he also put a pressure on a third down call, which forced Tennessee to go in fourth down at the end of the third quarter as well. So I think up front, those guys and Lovie Smith as a whole defense was pretty good, I think, up to that point. And I suppose the biggest flaw they made in the red zone was Zach Cunningham punching the ball out and somebody jumping on it, which was which I thought it would get overturned when I was just watching it on my mobile when I was coming back there, but I thought it would get overturned. But yeah, I thought the defense overall, you know, acquitted themselves well, I think, considering the offense they were up against.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's what I'm not sure what their contract situations are, but Collins, Grugier Hill, King, those three definitely need to be retained at all costs, I think. Well, not at all costs, but, you know, at reasonable costs. Blacklock's actually had a very good year. He was out a couple of games. He was hurt. But the games that he's played, you can see him making an impact, even if it's not been reflected in the box score. And then remember, Greenard was out hurt yesterday, and they were able to do all that. So I think they've done a really solid job with the defensive line. Derek Rivers showed up, and he looked good. Again, no complaints there. The biggest shock for me was actually the secondary. Eric Murray, actually.
Yeah,
like, where did he come from? Like, where was this guy the whole, you know, past couple of years or last year or whatnot? He actually looked like he belonged out there. So maybe it's the way the scheme is. I don't know, but I mean, yeah, he looked good. And of course, Reed looked good. Jacob Martin, he got that strip sack. Yeah. So, I mean, they've done a very good job of our defense, all things considered, especially compared to where it was last year. There's an article, I gotta find it. I gotta source it because I almost feel bad repeating the claim out of it without having the source, but I'm going to say it anyways because I think it's interesting. The Texans are playing like a top 15 defense. They're playing like a better defense than their record shows. However, the article made the point that it's based off the Texans um, having just incredible turnover luck. Like you don't expect teams to have as many turnovers as the Texans have forced, which is making the defense look better than they actually are. So I thought that was always a hallmark of Lovie Smith defenses is their ability to create turnovers, but maybe not at this pace. But regardless, we're top 15 defense with turnovers, without the turnovers. Still, we've gone from having an all-time worst defense to at least, not the worst 10 defenses in the league without the turnovers. So it's just been an incredible, incredible job by Lovie Smith, the guys they've put up there. And, we don't have the superstars either anymore. So I have no complaints about the defense. Like they won that game. And still, to me, it's the greatest irony. Like last year, if we had this defense last year, and granted, we all know the situations around that, but this defense with last year's offense, like that team makes some noise.
Yeah.
Like they're easily in the playoffs. They're maybe not quite a Super Bowl team, but they're in there. They can make some noise.
Yeah.
So it's funny. We go from having 1 year where we have an all-time worst defense with a pretty good offense to this year we have a pretty good defense to an all-time bad offense, even with Tyrod Taylor playing fairly well yesterday.
Yeah, I suppose there's probably some points I would caveat yesterday. They were down, so they had to ban the run game, albeit. So I think there's still a big weakness with the current composition of players in this scheme, I think. And, there'll be a few ground attacks that catches out before the end of the season. I suppose the weather probably inhibited it, and obviously the injuries as well, mounted up. And Tannehill had a career bad day, but that all being said, you still got to go out there and they're getting paid to make plays too. But yeah, I think some of the secondary guys probably popped a little more than they normally would just because of the competition they were going against, rather than it wasn't Julio Jones, AJ Brown was standing on the sidelines. So you've got to compete with that. But one thing I thought to myself, John, yesterday and this morning again watching back was I don't think Malik Collins will be here next year, because when you think of how rare interior pressure is to find, there's not a huge amount of guys that do. You can count on one hand, and I think he's flashed enough the last couple of weeks that he's probably going to get an offer that if you're his agent, you're probably going to say.
It's like, it would be something if we could lock up both Blacklock and Collins, because then you've got an interior defense line they can do something like that'll be something you can build a team around. But yeah, you're right. Collins, they don't lock him up soon. Like if he reaches free agency in the offseason, like there's going to be a bit. I think that he's going to go out there and he's going to get a pretty decent check. And here's also the thing to be concerned about that though. Last time he got a decent check, his play fell off the ledge. Like he did not look good.
Yeah, I think that's a consideration. So that may well, inhibit teams from giving him money. He's a couple of years older than he was when he got that deal in Vegas, and Dallas chose not to re-sign him as well. So yeah, I mean, those forces might, he might have upset enough dealing coaches to not get enough references for anybody to open up their checkbook in the front office. But we'll wait and see. I think he's been a real positive on that. And it was, it's great to win a game. I know that everybody's made comments about the Texans football feeling and all that kind of stuff, but it's certainly good to win a game, and it's as I said, I'm not too bothered about draft order, and it's good and especially in the ex-Oilers and all that kind of stuff too. So sometimes it goes your way, and I think that's just the way the league. Even with an extra game this year, you're always any team, regardless of your ability coaching, you've always got a chance to win a game. But I think that the bye would have benefited as well. I think it does definitely looked fresh. Obviously Lonnie Johnson moving, didn't get many snaps. Jordan Akins, I mean, he was on his way out, or he was a healthy scratch yesterday as well. What did you make of that?
Healthy scratch, yep. Which is, I mean, it's the way to go. Akins won't be back. For whatever reason, he never really had as much of an opportunity as you would think he should have had, based on like his separation numbers, based on his yak numbers. Like he's a guy that you would think they would have tried to get the ball more for him. They would have schemed ways to throw the ball to him, and they never really did. But here's the fun thing: like Brevin Jordan is a younger version of Akins. Like, so go with the guy that's gonna develop. Like Brevin Jordan, who knows what he's gonna actually turn into? But right now, he's almost he's almost where Akins is. Like Akins can't block either. They kept trying to use Akins also as an an H back, and that never really worked. I think he sprung one run, and then he himself has had one solid run. So again, I don't ever know if it's the coach is giving up or he just can't do it. But you might as well at this guy point, when you've just got a younger version, especially where we see how this season's going to go, let the younger guy try and develop.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose you've got kind of, I suppose it's a needed win, because I think that'll maybe give some people a little bit of sentiment around the team, because you've got a stretch of 3 home games right now that we're looking potentially to be a little bit threadbare in the stands as well as on the field. But how do you think that win and sets up, and what's your expectations for this next 3-game stretch, which, a couple of these are perhaps winnable?
Well, I mean, if you just look by record, we should be able to at least play with both the Jets and the Seahawks. The Colts, how did the Colts do this past weekend? I know Jonathan Taylor is just otherworldly right now. So
yeah, they handled Buffalo. So
yeah, I don't think we're gonna play with the Colts. But the Jets and the Seahawks, those should be very, very competitive games. We've already beat the Jaguars. So our next 4 games, like if we come out with another win or two, like that's definitely within reason. I know there's going to be a lot of tears if we do, because our draft position is going to fall. But let's be honest, winning is so much more fun. And we're not. I mean, you look at the way the schedule fills out. Even if we get 2 more wins, we're still going to have a top 5 pick. Like it's not like it's going to drop us out of the top 10, because we're not beating the Chargers, we're not beating the Niners. And if we somehow beat the Titans again, even if that does cost us to fall out of the top 5, like I'm all for it. I'm all for beating the Titans twice in a year, no matter what.
Yeah, and it continues just to be such a strange year, like in terms of results. I mean, the Patriots like 25 to nothing on Thursday night. The Dolphins then obviously pick up form. Like the Panthers at the start of the year playing well, and that was one of the games maybe could have won in another night if Tyra was playing, but they've regressed subsequently. Yeah, and then the Colts go and handle the Bills, put 41 points. So it wasn't necessarily what you'd see it. So I think when you look around the league, it's kind of it's some strange results, continue to go. So I think you never know what's going to happen, because this year I don't know if it's coming off COVID, if it's having fans back in the stadium or what have you. There's been some strange results. So yeah, it's I suppose it just gives you it takes the burden off a little bit of win, doesn't it? I think, because it's been tough going at times. As you said, getting young guys to play, like there's a reason to go and watch the film and see what Brevin Jordan did. What did Jimmy Morrissey do? Is he a better opportunity for you at centre than bringing Justin Britt back on a couple of mil when you can play a guy at the vet min, or whatever, and approve it deal. So there is stuff to watch. I think, is there anything you want to see them, or any guys you want to see in this next stretch where you've got to kind of bit more of a controlled environment at home, less travel, more time to prepare? What do you think they need to be working on the next kind of couple of weeks?
Well, I mean, I want to see if there's anything with Royce Freeman.
Yeah.
I honestly, it's not what do I want to see, it's what I want to see less of, and I want to see less of David Johnson specifically. Yeah. I think that's done. Let's try something else. I just, no matter what it takes, I want to see less of David Johnson. Would prefer to see more Scotty Phillips, but he's on IR, so he's out for at least 3 weeks. And the fact that it's an ankle injury and they put him on the IR means that it's probably more than 3 weeks. So I don't think we're going to see any more of him. So hopefully we can see something with Freeman, see if he has anything. I would prefer that they go out and try and find another running back and just let David Johnson walk. But again, what do I know? So
yeah, I think
that's pretty much. I mean, that's pretty much where I'm at. Like I want him to win. I want to continue to see progress on the defense. The offense is just a hot mess.
Yeah, I think so. You want to see some watchable games, because there's been Buffalo, the Rams, there's been a number of ones, the Cards on the road, it just wasn't watchable. So some watchable games. I'm over the moon that I'm going to be going back there. I'll be there on Sunday. So I'm looking forward to that. It's been a long, long time since I've been there. So, or it feels like that anyway. So get to experience my first ever Thanksgiving in person, which is cool, and go watch a game on the Sunday. So I think it's probably going to maybe crystallize some of the stuff. You hear people about less tailgating and things like that. People disinterested, complete apathy for the team, but I'm still excited to go, and I'm still excited to hopefully start to see turn the corner a little bit. And sometimes wins can do that, but I think the Jets is a reasonable option to win, and I think it's a game that it might be Joe Flacco, or it might be Mike White, or it might be Zach Wilson. I probably don't know at this stage, but yeah, it's certainly a game, I think, John, that's winnable.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be able to play with them at least. Like, it shouldn't be a blowout. They've got I think Carter's hurt, but I was going to say between Ty Johnson and Michael Carter, they've got a couple of interesting running backs. Mike White, I mean, I know a couple of weeks ago, everybody was incredibly excited about him, but didn't he just get benched for Joe Flacco? So, I mean, I'd rather see Zach Wilson than Flacco, just because I want to see like what the younger guys can do. I'd rather see White than Flacco, but if Flacco plays, I mean, you know what? It doesn't really matter who plays. I think that we should be able to compete with them.
Yeah, and yet Elijah Molden and get 142 over 8 receptions and a defeat to Miami. So I think there's another guy that that they're in a kind of similar position to us, albeit probably a year further forward. But it's certainly a chance on paper anyway. They've obviously got a number of guys, just like the Miami game, that would come in and walk in and start in our team. But yeah, we'll wait and see. Game at home. I don't know what the crowd will be like after Thanksgiving, but you got any Thanksgiving plans, John? Any traditions that you want to share?
No, not really. We're just gonna eat turkey here at the house because my youngest son, his birthday is the first week of December. So normally prior to his birth, grandparents would come down, but because his first birthday, nobody's coming down. So it's just gonna be me, the wife, and the 2 kids, and that'll be nice.
Nice. So flying on Wednesday morning. Hopefully go to the Rockets on Wednesday night. And then staying at a good friend of mine who's looking after us for the weekends. And we'll go and spend Thanksgiving with their family. So looking forward to that. Never done it before. So a true reminder of what it means to be a Texan rather than just on the field. So there's a whole world of it as well. So, and that's probably the best bit about it, or it's the best you can say about it, certainly about this team for the last year. But it felt it was good to feel on the right side of the tracks, I suppose, for once, for a Sunday.
It's winning is always better than losing. I mean, I absolutely get the tanking mentality, like, oh, you want to get the best pick possible. But as a fan, as somebody that watches the Texans and enjoy football, I would much rather take a win any day of the week.
Yeah, definitely. Well, looking forward to, John, I know you'll be up in Austin, John. I'm hoping to meet up with some people that have been very kind with their time, and I wouldn't be able to do this without all those people. So thanks again to John for his time. Any last words before we get here, John?
No. I mean, hopefully everybody has a happy, safe Thanksgiving, and we get to watch the Texans, further ruin their draft position this weekend against the Jets.
Well, that's it. Yeah, it's a decent. It's a not bad slate of games on Thursday if you're watching. So happy Thanksgiving when it comes to you. Thanks again, everybody, for listening. I was probably in a bit of a pit of apathy in terms of writing any articles, but a long haul flight might engender one. But check anything you have on podcasttexas.com. If you like it on YouTube, last week's one, looking at some draft prospects, really picked up. So please keep sharing, subscribing, all that kind of good stuff. And we'll speak to you again next week.